Perfect. So it sounds like we're actually live now. Um, Great. So while we're waiting for folks to trickle in, and thank you so much for joining us on this Tuesday morning, we'll have people in chat just say where they're tuning in from. So Vincent and myself are tuning in from sunny San Francisco. Cool. Maybe we'll kick it off with intros just so you know what to expect for the next 45 or so minutes. So I'm Shauna. I lead our product marketing team here at Persona. I've had the pleasure of working with our product teams for the last 4.5 years to help launch a lot of our new features and solutions. Over to you, Vincent.
Thanks, Shauna. Great to meet everybody. I know folks are still trickling in. My name is Vincent. I'm on the product team here at Persona, one of our founding product managers. I've been at the company for almost 8 years now, and this is the first live stream I've ever done. So this will be exciting for all of us.
Yeah, you and I both, our YouTube careers are starting today. It's cool. Well, like Vincent mentioned, this is our first YouTube live stream. So we have people monitoring the chat. If anyone runs into technical difficulties, do not be shy, and someone on the Persona team can help you out. For other folks who have attended our other webinars and live sessions before, the same rules apply. We always love questions, and we have dedicated Q&A time at the end of this to hear any and all questions, either about like the demos that you see today, things we didn't talk about, anything on your mind for H2. We're really excited to answer those, and we'll make sure to save time. And lastly, even though this is a YouTube live, the session is also going to be recorded and shared out via email. So if there's a demo that you want to follow up on, you'll have it at your fingertips. So with that, let's get started. So I think a lot of folks know this, especially our customers, but there has been kind of a blistering amount of activity going across identity, fraud solutions in our platform. And Persona has actually launched, I think, a lot of features in the last 6 months to help our customers keep up. But Built by Persona, which is a new biannual release motion, is our chance to highlight some of the most impactful launches, some of the launches that we know a lot of our customers have asked for. So for those of you who maybe ended up here and haven't heard about Built by Persona, we have a beautiful website that I think you can find just on our homepage that highlights 25 or so launches that, again, we launched in the first 6 months of this year. But rather than talking to you all via a series of slides, Vincent and I thought it would be really fun to do a bunch of live demos and again, peel the onion back and show off some of these features in action and also talk about why we built them, who they're for, and why we're really excited for folks to start using them. So with that, Vincent, I think this is the fun part where we get to kind of suggest to each other what we should demo. So I'm going to let you have or make the call here. Where do you think we should start for today's session?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've organized our launches into four nice categories here. So we got to just start in order. Let's start from the top left in the fraud section.
Let's do it. What is top of mind?
Yeah, so there's so many things that we could talk about here. Unfortunately, we would be here all day if we actually wanted to talk about and show off all of these amazing demos. But let's talk about one that most of the audience maybe hasn't heard of. I think many folks here might be familiar with either seeing or conducting a government ID or a selfie verification. But many Persona customers often need to verify what we call supplementary documents. That can be bank statements for loans, incorporation documents for business onboarding, health insurance cards for benefits, and much more. So we'd love to show off some of the features that we built around what we call the Document AI product.
Yeah, I'll let you get that set up since I think you'll be demoing this one, but this is definitely a topic near and dear to my heart as someone who's worked on KYB and business onboarding. A lot of use cases, as you mentioned, Vincent, include documents as part of it, and we found that you often need like a kind of like custom checks and ways of like managing those documents because they're a lot less structured than the government IDs that a lot of us might be more familiar with. So I'll let you pull that up and let's jump into it.
Absolutely. Thank you for the primer while I was pulling up
Yeah.
some of the tabs here. So let's go ahead and start on the Persona dashboard. So we can imagine that a user has actually just submitted a document, and we can open it up in what we call the Persona document viewer. And on the right side here, we can see all the different extractions, for attributes like full name or address. And customers can actually configure additional, fields and attributes that they might actually need to extract from the document. And we can actually see all the different checks that have passed or failed as well. So a very quick and easy summary. And in this case, it's clear that it's a PDF that's been edited. You can also actually navigate very quickly to different aspects um, on the page. So you can navigate to relevant areas in the document by actually clicking on these little bounding boxes here. And in this case, you can actually see that we've actually extracted the name from two different parts of the document. So there's two bounding boxes here. Furthermore, with Persona's enhanced fraud checks, you can actually get even more signals. So let's take a look at this other sample document, this bank statement here. And first, you can see that there's actually content inconsistencies that are highlighted across different versions of the exact same file. So this is always suggestive of potential edits that the user may have made to actually tamper with the file. There's also various suspicious metadata that investigators would never be able to see on their own that can be exposed around PDF and image editor use. And actually, in this case, you can see that there's a difference between the creation versus the latest modification dates. Again, the use of editors and producers that show up in the EXIF metadata. And like before, you can see that the various visual anomalies are actually highlighted inside these bounding boxes. And you can move across the document, which makes it easy to review. So in sum, the document viewer is a very powerful new tool that we have for reviewers on these supplementary documents.
Yeah, and one thing I might ask you to mouse over, Vincent, is like the document translator too. I know a lot of customers are working with international documents or might have like manual review teams spread out across a few geos. So would love for you to show this off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for the call out there. We were showing some of the fraud indicators, but again, in the interest of making the review process as streamlined as possible, you can actually see that you can use real-time live translations of the actual documents. So it's compatible with all of your global support teams.
Cool. Any specific checks or indicators to call out that might be really impactful for customers?
Yeah, I think we actually just looked at a bunch. We've seen all different kinds of documents that we've flagged for all different kinds of reasons. I think one of the most interesting things is, there can be some simple mistakes at times as well. So bad actors may actually be using different font families, or they may be using different font sizes. And all of our tools and models will actually, parse through the entire document and look for all those types of inconsistencies. So it's not only the metadata underlying the file, but also the actual visual analysis of all the documents.
Amazing. I feel like we're off to a great start for these demos. If you don't have anything else, Vincent, I'll take us back and we can go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's keep going.
Let's do it. Okay, so let's go back. So we ticked off the first demo on the fraud side, and I know we have at least a handful more. So where do you think we should go next?
Yeah, so let's move on to the second category. Let's go to identity. And there's a lot of exciting launches here. So I'm actually going to let you pick the first one instead.
Yes, you are teeing this up for me perfectly. So I'm really excited to talk about something called like Atlas, which folks might have heard about or seen over the last few months. So I'll talk a little bit about why we built Atlas before we jump into like the demo and showing off how folks can use it. So again, as folks might know, especially if you're like a marketplace or a social media platform, there's been an absolute explosion in age assurance laws over the last few years globally. So that raises a lot of requirements for these types of platforms to institute some sort of age assurance methods. And any product compliance or legal team knows it's not just complying with one of these laws, trying to keep track of all of them and making sure that your platform is in compliance. On the other side of it, there's also been a large wave of digital IDs. So the same kind of like global pattern that we're seeing on the age assurance side, we're also seeing it mirrored on the digital ID side. So we built this resource called like Atlas earlier this year as a way for our internal teams really to keep track of everything going on behalf of our customers. But we found that it was really useful and actually valuable to our customers and actually just like wider civil society. So this is something that's actually accessible to everyone. So if you wanted to right now, you could go to atlas.with persona and check this out. But I will do a live demo instead, and then we'll use this to have our, is it like Carmen Santiago where she goes around the world? But let's pick a region. So where do you think we should start, Vincent?
Yeah, you're gonna force us to pick some countries, but let's start on the age assurance side actually, which
Yeah.
is very topical for many of our customers. And maybe let's go with United Kingdom and Australia, which are two countries that have been very aggressive and progressive about how they view age assurance.
Yeah, definitely. So the way Atlas works is, again, you can browse, you can search up the country you have in mind, and once you actually pull it up, you'll see kind of a collection of not just age assurance laws, but also relevant like data protection or data privacy laws. So in this case, as you mentioned, Vincent, there's a lot going on in the UK, most notably with like the Online Safety Act. And one of the things that we tried to really distill into Atlas is like a very clear and crisp summary of like what this law is, what are the responsibilities of various platforms, what is, the effective date, since we know a lot of these laws are in various states of like regulatory, kind of moving through the regulatory pipeline. So we found that it was really important to be clear of like what is actually required for your platform at this given point in time. So there's Online Safety Act, there's some of those aforementioned data privacy laws and consumer protection laws that I talked about. We also always try to include like the official resources too. So your legal team and compliance team can dig into this further. But I know you mentioned, I think you said Australia. So we're going to go across the Pacific and show off what's happening here too. So similarly, there's also kind of an overarching online safety, in this case, like amendment or social media bill. In the UK, if folks saw, like the requirement was actually to verify that users are over, or to verify users at a threshold of 18 years old. In Australia, it's 16. So already you're starting to see that some of that like divergence or like different types of requirements that a product team might have to keep track of. Um, I won't spend too much time here, but you can imagine for each of the many, many geos rolling out age assurance laws, this will be a helpful resource just to see what's going on. Okay, so that was age assurance. And if folks saw, there's this very handy toggle to switch it over to the other half of this, which is digital IDs, as I mentioned. So I'm going to switch it over here. But same question to you, Vincent. Where do you think we should dig into to begin our digital IDs tour?
Yeah, let's switch it up again. Let's actually focus in on two countries and regions again that have been very prominent with their digital ID adoption and usage. So let's go Japan and then EU as a wider region.
Okay, fun. Let's do it. So we're going to Japan. Yeah, I think this one is going to be a fun one to talk about. So Japan has this digital ID that's been actually widely adopted by the population. You can see here over 80% of the population has some version of the My Number card. And this is something that uh, we not only support, but have been kind of helping our customers figure out how to verify. So one of the nuances that you'll often see in a lot of these like countries covered in Atlas is what types of claims or fields are available for this like given type of digital ID. So in this case, you can see here My Number offers a variety of different claims and fields to verify against. The other kind of like nuance to keep in mind for digital IDs, and again, as an example of that, like divergence in practice is different digital IDs might have like different requirements of who can actually leverage the information in them. So I might throw this one to you, Vincent. Like, what can you tell us about My Number and who can actually use it in their verification flows?
Yeah. So I think one thing that's really important is that the government has actually mandated that for certain use cases, for instance, for telecoms and for fintechs, they actually have to start using the new My Number Card digital ID integration, which is also known as JPKI. So, I think what we see is that it's a combination of both public and private use cases that are kind of driving digital ID adoption forward. And in Japan, it's unique because it's for both of those reasons, which is a large portion of the population does or already have the My Number Card. This has actually been a multi-year effort that kind of started going back into the 2010s. And now the government has, also said, hey, for these more regulated, for these higher risk use cases, digital IDs is actually the safer. And as you mentioned, also the more privacy preserving option, because in many cases, you may not actually need to share all of the information that came from the ID. You may only need to share your birth date for age use cases, or only specific information like your name and address. So
Yeah, well, I'll definitely come back to that privacy mention. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one of the cooler use cases, I think, coming out of Japan for My Number is I think if you want to buy Pokemon cards in Japan, you actually have to show My Number card. So a good example of a fun private use case. Cool. And where did you want to take us lastly for this world tour?
yes, we have to go to EU. So
Okay.
I think it'd be great to show off not only at the country level what some of the differences are, but then how we think about the EU region as a whole.
Yeah, let's do it. I happen to take a stop to France, so you can start there, but you might be able to tell us how this pattern applies to the wider EU. So for folks who might be based out of the EU or tracking what's going on in sort of their digital ID programs, there's an overarching mandate across the EU to, accept and offer identity wallets for citizens. This is known as eIDAS 2.0 for folks paying attention. Um, and, as you might expect with any sort of large centralized rollout, there's kind of like different levels of maturity for each kind of like member for each of the 27 member states of the EU. So at least for in the case of like France and Germany, we've been starting to work, I think, with the official kind of like bodies to help with this pilot around their ID wallet.
Mhm.
But Vincent, you might be able to tell us a little bit more about what's going on there.
Yep, yeah. Just to build upon your answer, what we find interesting is that each of the member states is actually required to create a wallet for their population, but all of the wallets across the EU member states need to be interoperable according to the IDAS 2.0 standard. And so, even though EU as a region has pushed forward this idea of a consolidated wallet, each country at the end of the day still has its own digital ID schemes. So it's kind of a combination effort that we're obviously tracking very closely and working with our EU partners on.
Yeah, and I think in the same way for the age assurance side, one of the, like the notable fields on the entry was kind of the status of the rollout. I think one that's going to be really important for digital IDs is just like the coverage. So again, because let's say the EU is a little bit earlier in their digital ID journey than Japan, which has like 80% of their citizens with like a My Number card. You'll likely want to plan for fallbacks or just like alternate verification methods, but this is definitely, as you can also see by the globe just being covered in purple, this is definitely like the future of identity. It just might take a little bit to get there. Yeah. I think that's probably enough globetrotting for today. But again, we are super excited for folks to dig into Atlas, to share with your legal and product and compliance teams. One of the things I do want to call out is the team very much, again, wants this to be like an open source resource. So if this is data you want to bring into your application, your tooling, it's available. And if you do have ideas on additions or want to like converse with our policy team, that is also very much welcome and is available here too. Okay, so that I think takes us out of Atlas, but I have a feeling there's still more to talk about in the identity realm. So I might push us towards Relay since you brought up privacy, Vincent.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's talk about Relay. Maybe just to provide a quick primer while Shauna pulls up the demo here. We're really excited about Relay. It's a new product that we've launched, and it's based off the principle here of double blind verification. So for many of our customers, the verification experience that you're familiar with, a company is going to ask you for information, you're going to submit this, you're going to verify it, and then this company may need this information for regulated use cases like opening up a bank account. However, what we've seen across the past, 2, 3 years is there are many more use cases like on social media, where you may not need to know all of that sensitive information. And so a double-blind verification is where persona actually doesn't know what site a given user is verifying for, and the site actually doesn't see any sensitive information about the end user either. So it's a very important concept, double blind, but it's privacy preserving for both our customers and our users. So, Jonna, take it away.
Yeah, let's show it off actually. Yeah, so like Vincent mentioned, or just to reiterate, there's been many use cases we've been seeing both from our customers and the market at large that actually focus on a more simple question. It might be a question of, is this person human who is trying to access my social media site? Or is this person over a certain age, especially if I need to comply with one of the aforementioned age assurance laws I just went through? So again, Relay is our answer to that, and I'll show you a little bit about how it works. It's actually a very fast demo for some reasons I'll get into in a little bit. But this is kind of what the Relay experience starts with or looks like. It's like a widget that can be embedded inside your site. So again, let's actually imagine I'm a PM at like a dating site and I want to add Relay to my flows. The other kind of aspect of Relay that's worth touching on is this idea of like claim types. So Relay templates or are like pre-built kind of like templates that are aligned to a specific use case. So I mentioned earlier that, I perhaps might have to deal with different age assurance laws around the world. So our product team has actually taken on some of the burden and research of figuring out some starting points for compliance or best practices here to align with specific use cases. So you can see here in Australia for the age assurance law that I went over, the requirement was 16 plus. So you'll see here that the Relay template automatically and dynamically changes to verify that the user is 16 plus. But if I was verifying a user in the UK, you might choose to use a UK aligned template, and you can see it automatically changes to 18 plus. I think in this case, I'm going to go for something a little bit simpler, which is just making sure that my user is in fact a real person. So I'll choose the live human presence, but we have plenty of claim types and we're always looking to have more. So if folks have ideas or want to discuss, we'd love to have that conversation with you. So in the case of live human presence, we'll likely just ask the user to prove that they are in fact a real person. And you'll kind of see from this experience as I start it, it actually feels very similar to like a CAPTCHA experience where we know we want to get the user in quickly. We want to like disclose very clearly what's happening and the fact that this is in fact like double blind and privacy preserving. So in this case, as an end user, I'll click through. I'll now see this kind of loading screen that explains what's happening. And I believe because I'm just checking humanness, it's going to be a selfie verification. So I'll do this really quickly. Let's see. Perfect. And the really cool thing is this like selfie verification still has, the same models, the same checks underneath the hood. The difference is what's actually returned to you as the organization using Relay. So in this case, my dating app just got a result of Shauna is in fact a real human, and I can go on my way and start using the application. Anything else to add as for Relay, Vincent?
No, I think I was just going to say, look, I think I speak for all of us when we say, nobody likes a CAPTCHA, right? But what we think is that certainly nobody likes going through a full identity verification experience where a company is collecting unnecessary information. And so we think that there's a happy medium here with these use cases where you may not need all that information. And I'll just reiterate here that the way that Relay works is that all of the actual information that we've collected is automatically deleted once the user actually completes the verification as well. So again, double blind, privacy preserving for those use cases.
Yeah, and I think for the more technical or maybe cryptographic focused folks in the audience, we actually just published today, I believe, our like Relay white paper. So if you're interested in taking a look at some of like the technology behind this, which is actually built around Privacy Pass, you're more than welcome to. We're actually looking for collaboration and feedback here. So very excited for that. Cool. I think that was Relay. We're already, believe it or not, more than like halfway through. So I think that is probably a good segue into some of the more overarching solutions and products on our platform. And that actually probably is a good segue into the platform section.
Mhm.
So, Vincent, I feel like it's not a webinar in 2026 unless we talk about AI or agents. So I'd like to talk about case review agents.
Yes, let's do it. Let's do it. Why don't you give a quick primer to the audience while I pull up the demo?
Yeah, let's do it. So as folks might know, there are many, complex identity use cases that often require like a manual review team, whether it's KYC and reviewing like an application that might have a lot of like data points or signals attached to it, to KYB, where there's a lot of input, not only about the business, but also like the ultimate beneficial owners. So again, just like how the rest of the world is moving towards kind of like thinking about agents or agentic tooling, we've also been on this journey too on behalf of our customers. So what Vincent's about to show is our version of agents inside the dashboard.
Yes. So there are actually so many different agents
Yeah.
that we would love to show, but we'll just keep the example very tight and very scoped here. So what we're looking at right now is actually the persona dashboard for case view. So this is what a manual review or a human agent would look at to determine what the next steps would be for this individual's identity verification. So on the right side, you can see that I've pulled open our Copilot panel here, and I've actually selected our KYC case reviewer, which we will talk about in just a second in terms of how it's configured. But I'm going to go ahead and start the review. And in the meantime, while we wait, because none of us are going to enjoy watching this agent run, I'm actually going to pull up the KYC case reviewer and what it's actually doing. So in this case, if we go ahead and take a look at this view, you'll see that it's very simply just a prompt, right? And from this prompt, our customers can actually select different models, right? Different customers are already using different models, so they can also bring their own API keys as well, so they can power it with their own models if they have things like zero data retention requirements, things like that. And then you can also change the settings in terms of reasoning effort, right? So on the right side, you can preview and test the agent, but I want to focus our attention on the prompt on the left side here. And you can see this is a fairly complex prompt, but many of our customers already have a established standard operating procedure or some sort of checklist that their agents are walking through. And so what they can do is actually they can import those files, and then we'll automatically create a draft of the prompt based off those files. So the actual process of getting an agent up and running is actually quite simple, quite fast, and that's very intentional. However, maybe one of the most important things to think about as it relates to agents is what permissions they have, right? Especially given the sensitivity of the information that they have access to. So under here, you can see that we were just looking at cases, and within case permissions, this agent has the ability to take certain actions, and then we've disabled other actions, right? So they can add a comment to the case. So we'll see in just a second, once the case reviewer has completed, it can take its findings and it can actually add a comment to the case. So anybody else who's accessing the case later, they can see, what the actual results were. They can also attach objects to a case. There's a bit of more kind of technical terminology here, but the very simple explanation is that you can pull in more data into the case that will help you with your review. But we've disabled the ability to search for other cases or send a case message directly to the end user or update the case status to an actual approved or declined, which may actually trigger, business logic downstream. So these permissions are very, very important, and they're important to set up correctly. And you can also even set them up for different integrations. So if if your queue is actually powered by something like Zendesk, you can actually set up the agent to ingest that information. And you can even mask the PII entirely such that the agent actually has no access to actual end user sensitive info. So yeah, it's super important to be able to set up the agents correctly. And then if we come back here on the actual case reviewer, you can see that it completed these tasks. It gave a summary of what it found. It checked all of the various verification checks across the government ID and the selfie verification. And then not only that, but it also looked at a lot of passive signals as well. So you'll actually be able to see that it was actually looking at a bunch of information around the bot score, the behavioral threat level, whether the VPN was a proxy, what's the number of IP addresses that are associated with this case. And you can see that it actually found one big exception, which is the address that was provided in the verification is pretty far away from where the user is actually located based off of their network. So all this information is here for the agent, can interact with it, ask more questions, and you can see it left a big case comment here as well. So I'll pause there because I know that was a lot to ingest, even though there's actually a lot more that we can share too, Shauna.
Yeah, no, this is great. And as someone who's worked with a few marketplaces, I know there's a lot of marketplaces using like a manual review team for like fraud reviews. So this already seems like a huge time saver. I know we've been in the middle of like early access for this. So Vincent, can you tell us any like learnings or kind of like best practices that we've seen from customers as they started using like agentic tooling in their workflows?
Yeah. Actually, that's a really good question and a good reminder, actually, of a section that we haven't gone over yet. I promise I'll tie this back to your question here, but I'm going to open up the agent evals panel. And the reason why this is relevant to your question is because we definitely understand that there is no world in which a customer is going to automate their entire review work stream, right? I think there's many risks associated with that. And obviously agents are non-deterministic and they're not always predictable. And so what you can do is actually our customers can set up evals directly within the Persona platform. So I'll just pull up an example here for our KYB case reviewer. But you can see here that you can take different versions of the same agent, right? And you can test them, effectively A/B testing them across the same set of cases. And you can look at the outcomes for, what it ended up recommending, whether it was an approve or decline. And then you can judge the efficacy of the agent with each change. So what we've seen from customers is many of them will use the evals to kind of test the waters, right? They'll set up limited permissions. They'll use it as purely supplementary on top of their existing processes. And then over time, as they get more comfortable, we've seen them really be able to cut down their review time significantly.
Nice. And I want to bring up a question from chat since it's pretty timely. Someone was asking if the models that we're using, and I know that customers can choose from a few, but are any of them training on like the data that you see here?
No. So, those everything is in terms of how we train, we do not train on actual customer data. And so, this is very, very important, especially because, we don't want it to hallucinate or start to mix its findings in terms of, different sets of data.
Nice. Well, it's exciting. I want to make sure we get time for Q&A, Vincent. So I might have us speed through the very last demo, but I
Sounds
heard you
good.
have interesting for us.
Yes, actually, yes. So let's go back to our last demo here. And we're actually going to talk about something in solutions. So I would love for us to actually double click into something, a big trend in terms of fraud trends that we've seen around candidate fraud. So recruiting fraud, folks up funnel trying to kind of infiltrate companies.
Yeah, let's do it. I'll talk over this as you maybe set up the demo here.
Great.
So um, folks here might be familiar if you've been following headlines with the headlines around like North Korean IT workers who are deployed into various like enterprises, maybe to get access to something that they shouldn't, to steal customer data. The list goes on. We've actually seen lists being a trend though of like kind of fraudulent candidates or folks with like malicious intentions making their ways into like enterprises and companies. We've seen this be a trend that's actually just played out more widely. And it's something that and I think the rest of the industry is calling like candidate fraud. So one of the things that Vincent's about to show you is how we approach this. And you'll see very intentionally, this is like not in the Persona dashboard. So one of the learnings that we've had as we started working with customers on this like problem is we really need to meet, in this case, like the recruiting and the IT security teams where they're at. So Vincent, I'll let you take it from here.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, as always, for the great primer there. So what we're looking at actually, as Shauna mentioned, is actually a Greenhouse dashboard. So Greenhouse is one of the partners that we work with that we have deep integrations with, and they're called the applicant tracking system. So in this case, you can imagine that, I'm this candidate, I'm applying for a software engineering job, which I'm wholly unqualified for. But we'll put my application in. And in this case, if I'm the recruiter, I can actually, trigger from within Greenhouse a stage change. So let's say I'm moving over to, I've progressed to a phone interview. And what will happen is Persona will actually ingest, this signal from the Greenhouse dashboard, and it will actually send an email over to the candidate. So we'll wait just a second here as I receive this email. Great. So let me pull it over here. So if I'm now the candidate, I receive this email, I actually pop open this link, and it's a persona identity verification flow. So in this case, I'm actually, before I hop on this interview, I actually need to verify my identity by providing a quick selfie. And the reason I want to do this is, let's say I've already submitted a government ID and a selfie in a previous stage. And so for this stage of the funnel, I just need to submit a selfie, which then gets compared to the previous selfie to make sure that I'm still the same person. Because one of the common fraud vectors in the candidate, funnel is actually, bait and switch, proxies, other folks interviewing on your behalf, and so on and so forth. And you can see actually from this link, this is another integration that we have with Zoom, where once I click on this Zoom link, it'll actually automatically redirect me. So I'm not going to do that here because we're, going to get kicked out here of,
Gonna
of the
be on
meeting.
it during the live stream.
Yes, exactly. But you can imagine once the candidate has actually gone through this process on the recruiter side, they can actually see the link that the end user went through, and they can see the status of the verification. So this is a really powerful mechanism to create lightweight checks within the candidate funnel, and make sure that you're hiring the right people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll re-emphasize what you said too, which is, it's not just about kind of verifying the person or making sure that they are indeed not a deep fake. It's like making sure that they are the same person throughout the process. So we found, I think, in some of our customers who are early adopters of this, they were very intentional with their HR team or recruiting team in terms of where do you place a persona verification or a selfie verification during the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I will call out here too is we oftentimes recommend our customers connect the candidate lifecycle along with the employee lifecycle. So ideally, if we are able to verify, individuals when they're still candidates, as soon as they become employees, we actually have a lot more data, a bigger pool of data that we can use to determine if there's ever any fraudulent activity on the employee side as well. So, we don't want to add too much friction, but it is important, I think, for everybody in this day and age, especially with, AI deepfakes and these fraud vectors to be thinking about this problem.
Nice. Well, I hope you get the job. And I think that takes us back to Q&A. I actually already saw a few questions kind of like float through the chat. So maybe we'll just go in rough order. So I think I missed this one when we were doing like the fraud kind of like section, but I think it's a good one. It's what is the biggest fraud pattern that you're seeing right now? And what did Persona build in H1 as a result? Do you want to
Yeah.
start?
So
Yeah.
yeah. I'll start, and I think this is it's a good
Yeah.
question, and since we were just talking about this, I will go ahead and talk about some of the different workforce attacks that we've seen, both from candidate and employees. And so beyond this kind of bait and switch and proxy and all the things that we have also talked about already, there's also a big push around phishing that we've seen. So, these are bad actors who are trying to socially engineer. They're sending employees links when they trigger, password resets. And there's a lot of things that we're building to prevent this, all the way from very simple things like, for instance, anytime there's a QR code that's shown, that QR code will automatically expire after 10 seconds. So, bad actors can't take a screenshot of this QR code and then, send it elsewhere. So, those are all, various fraud attack vectors. And, obviously the workforce space is kind of a prime target right now, just given sensitive information. So that's definitely, large vectors that we are trying to prevent, not only with active detection, but especially with passive passive signals, right? So if we detect users on mobile devices, we can collect a lot of device telemetry that suggests, whether or not they're using jailbroken or rooted devices and things like that.
Yeah, I know that device telemetry data is also super important, just in the more general fraud side of the house. I think for my answer, I'll probably talk about camera injection attacks. So this is like a vector that we saw last year, but we definitely saw, or we've been seeing a rise in over the last couple of months and quarters. And for those of you who aren't familiar, camera injection attack is basically when someone takes over the camera feed and uses some sort of like virtual camera. The thing that's interesting about this as like a fraud vector, though, is like, sometimes folks might be using a virtual camera for whatever reason, or there might not be a very specific signal that gets flagged for virtual camera injection attacks. So what we've found, or what we've been recommending to customers, especially in the last like half of the year, is really focusing on the many different types of signals we have available. So it's kind of like an answer that's a little bit of a cheat code, but rather than focusing on one signal, I'll have to call out, we've really been working to revamp our signals in the ways that you can like combine them, see anomalous patterns across your user population. And that'll be something that I think will be released in more fully in the second half of the year. But that kind of like signals revamp, I think, is going to be really important for a lot of the fraud vectors that we're seeing.
Totally agree.
Yeah, cool. And then I think this one will be a quick one, but I'll answer live too. What are examples of countries that need double blind for age assurance? I think this is when we were going through Relay and Atlas. So just to be very straightforward, France and Italy are the two examples you'll typically hear of countries that require a double blind method for age assurance. And the question that I actually want us to make sure we have time to answer, so I'll change the orders. Like, can you share more about the roadmap for the rest of the year?
Yeah.
Vincent,
This
yeah,
question,
what are you
yeah,
looking
this
forward to?
this question is right in my wheelhouse
Yeah.
as a product person. So I'm glad someone asked this. So obviously we're very excited about the H1 launches, but there's probably a couple that I would say for H2 that I'm very excited about. So maybe we'll do a little back and forth here. Sean, I'll share one. Would love to hear from you, and then I can share my second one. So the first one is around what I will call reusability in terms of our reusability efforts. And so, we're very cognizant of the fact that everybody now in today's day and age, they have to resubmit their personal information over and over again. And there's a lot of different mechanisms that have emerged in terms of being able to kind of carry around this digital passport or this reusable identity, whether it's digital ID schemes or, private schemes. And so we are actively building towards, our solutions there, both for how customers can share data directly with each other, but also how end users can reuse their information through a wallet and share that with all of the customers across the Persona network. So we have a much more to say on that, but that's maybe one of the things that I'm most excited about, both as a product person, but also simply as an end user as well, right?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that day too, I think. I'll say on my end, one I also think touches on end users, and is exciting is a lot of our privacy tooling coming out in H2. So we talked a little bit when we were introducing Relay about a lot of new use cases that only require, knowing a basic fact about someone, like are they over 18? Are they in fact a real human? There's also, you can imagine those use cases are also the result of a lot of growing end user sentiment and just consciousness around privacy. So we're really excited to kind of pair some of these like privacy preserving verifications with enablement and best practices. And that's going to come in the form of this like privacy dashboard that we're going to roll out sometime in H2 that allows any organization to kind of host their own privacy policy, their own sub-processor list and end user comms, and more importantly, to track any changes that are made in partnership with like their legal and compliance team and with Persona's legal and privacy team. So I'm hoping in the net result means that when someone or end user goes through any sort of persona verification, whether it's Relay or something else, they have all the resources and documentation from an organization that helps build trust. So very excited for that. And I will selfishly plug, if anyone's interested in the beta, feel free to reach out to your Persona account team, and we'd love to work with you too.
Yes,
You mentioned you
yes.
had one more, Vincent.
I do.
I'll let
We have one more.
Yeah,
Maybe that's how we'll close it off. I think
yeah,
we each shared kind of efforts that are very, very important, I think, for our end users and our ultimate consumers. But I do want to share one that we're very excited about with customers that we get asked about a lot, which is a effort that I will kind of summarize as code first. And so this idea in with many of our customers who are using AI agents to actually write code, to build software, we are kind of transforming our entire platform to be code first. So what that means is, we're building a Persona CLI. We actually already have a Persona MCP that will allow our customers to actually interact with the Persona platform programmatically. So all of the interfaces that you see in the dashboard, those are all things that, your agents can also interact with to make changes to the inquiry flow in real time programmatically via code, instead of having to, click on a button, right, and say, save this template. So we're very, very excited about those efforts and excited to share more later.
cool. Yeah, I think on the next one in December, we'll have to show that off. Sounds like agents for everyone in 2026. Cool. Well, I know we didn't get to you quite all of the questions, but we also want to be respectful of time. So we just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. We're always happy to do more demos, so you can find Vincent and I or chat with your Persona team. And like I said, we'll be back here in December for Built by Persona Volume 2.
Thanks everyone for joining us.